Jeffrey Dimmick,
Present.
William Lysette, absent. Emily Gaiman,
Present.
Kyle Gangwear,
Present.
Priya Serene,
Here.
Nicole King,
Here.
Mary Jo Reinhardt,
Here.
Stephen Maud,
Present.
Christopher Wayock.
Is he listening? Can you hear us?
Christopher Wayock?
Fine. And representing administration, Mike Mahan, superintendent.
Lou Pepe, business administrator.
Tony Pigeon, Human Resources.
Karen Trinkle, Assistant Superintendent.
And Sharon Montaigne, solicitor.
And perhaps most importantly,
And Lovely, board recorder.
Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any visitor comments, Anne Marie? Nicole Doolin.
There's no microphone, is that expected?
There's not, you'll be picked up by the,
Okay. Do I have to keep my own 3-minute clock?
I will do it,
I should do it for you.
I got it.
I just didn't know what's happening.
Oh, he's got it. Yep.
Cool. Thank you for seeing me. I'm Nicole Dolan. I just wanted to give feedback as a community member. Tonight's meeting setup was confusing. I don't know if there could be improved communication in the future, but just because there was such a shift from how it's been done before, it was put on the schedule as a workshop. And the agenda was posted at the time that did not have anything like what we have in board meetings, like Pledge of Allegiance, visitor comments, or adjournment. Then the agenda changed partway through, I'm not sure when, but it's still called a workshop. So I just want to let you know that as a community member who comes to a lot of these, it wasn't what was expected, and it wasn't clear that that's what would happen. I don't know how many people are going to show up tonight at 7:30 thinking that that's when they get their chance to speak, because the workshop originally didn't say anything about visitor comments. So I just wanted to give that feedback that if it could be communicated better to the community, I think that would be helpful. One of the items on tonight's agenda is classroom signs, and I just wanted to say that I support and trust our teachers to make good decisions on how to inspire our students. Thank you.
John Schubert.
Years ago, my father wanted me to see the horrors of a totalitarian society. So he took me to Romania for 2 weeks. And I saw the fear in people's eyes. Their fear at knowing they could be arrested for making eye contact with an American teenager. I saw police on routine patrol, outfitted with war weapons. I saw the fear that comes with what the great author George Orwell called thought crime. The notion that if you even think about something the dictator doesn't like, you're in trouble. I'm sorry to see thought crime come to Southern Lehigh. I'm sorry to see a poster advocating kindness and science be thought of as a thought crime. The political extremists have decided that this poster is a thought crime. Our teachers are big boys and big girls. They are charged with teaching our students to think, to understand, to have critical thinking skills. Our teachers don't need a Soviet-style political officer to tell them what to think. I urge the superintendent and this board to waste no further time on thought crime.
We have another pre-meeting speaker. Did you want to speak?
Is it about taking about signs now?
Yes.
Okay.
You can speak. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Timothy Carney, Coopersburg. I know when we did, and I emailed all the board members and the superintendent, but when we stopped talking about masks, I remember we said, let's start talking about important things. And then I saw this on the agenda. And I'm just surprised that of all the things that we could be talking about to improve academics, that this is what we're going to talk about. I don't think taking a sign down, keeping it up, is going to really change things. My daughter, the only sign she talked about a teacher having was a Pittsburgh Steelers sign. Depending on how this is worded, if signs have to be academic, then teachers would have to take down things like, I used to have a Steelers sign in my classroom. I used to have just like a Sesame Street sign. No messages, it was a Sesame Street thing. I had Disney things in my classroom. I'm wondering too, if it's school grounds and things have to be academic, if that would include the gym and the stadium, any kind of signs that were non-academic. Who makes the decision? If it comes back to the principal and administration, I think they can do that now without a new policy. And my understanding, and legal and solicitor knows more than I do, my assumption was that teachers still had free speech rights and students, as long as it wasn't disruptive and interfering with the education process. Tinker and Supreme Court. And unless this is creating an extreme disruption, and I don't think it is. Maybe it is. I would hesitate to take away a teacher's right to decorate their room if it wasn't disruptive. I also see there's another policy that is about handling complaints. And I wasn't sure if signage would fall under one of those categories. I think there's one about operations, it's 90 something, or I think. I felt that if there was a complaint about the sign, that there might already be a system for a community member or parent to complain and for it to be handled. Teacher, it keeps going up levels to the board. If somebody appeals, there's a form, I think. I wasn't sure if signs fit under any of those categories. I also felt like a principal might be able to come in and tell a teacher that they have to decorate. I know I was told I had to do bulletin boards in a certain way. So I felt like maybe the principal already had that right to do something like that. So I'll be interested. And also, if there's a policy introduced tonight, I wish it would have been put out before being introduced at a meeting like this so that people could look into and make informed decisions instead of kind of on the spot. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. I want to welcome everyone to our first workshop session, a new format. We've been very excited. I've been very excited about the prospect of this format, thinking that it will give all of us the opportunity for input and discussion and debate, certainly to address some critical issues and exciting issues as far as academic initiatives within the district, and the opportunity to discuss very challenging, very serious issues such as some of our speakers identified tonight in a way that is open to the public, that people can hear the debate process in advance of being stuck on voting something in 2 minutes, after a motion is made. So again, we're very excited about it. And just 2 points that are off the agenda by way of introduction. I want to note that we have registered 2 families from Ukraine here who have fleeing violence in their country. And they join a small but important refugee community in our school district. And I thought it would be a very positive thing to note that our administrators, as they do with all students who are at risk, making every effort to make these families feel welcome. And the second thing I note, I think today is the first time well, certainly since I've been here and probably long before that, our 5-day average of COVID cases is 0. And so that, again, is a very positive development that we all hope will continue indefinitely, at least certainly through the end of the year. So with that, the first item on our agenda tonight is a facility committee update. I want to commend the facility committee and those who are attending, representing the board and the community. I think we've made some very big, productive steps with respect to it, and certainly members of the committee, Mr. Mond or Dr. Wayock, could weigh in, but I just wanted to give an update, as I said I would for each of our meetings, a standing update on the committee. The first is almost, by way of housekeeping. When we last left the discussion as a full board some months ago, we wanted to come back as a committee and confirm that the original plan of constructing a synthetic turf field here at the high school is postponed indefinitely. And so that's the idea that we're operating under, but we thought it would be good to report back to the board that in fact is the case. The second thought is that when we originally planned 2 fields, the one field was intended to be natural grass surface. But now that we're looking at only a single field, there's just universal sentiment that synthetic turf would be the far better option than the grass. And that is, again, I think a departure from when we last left it, but I think one that I don't believe is controversial, but certainly the reason we're here is people can talk about or offer their thoughts on that. The next is, we're getting through the process of design. We're making very good progress with our township being very cooperative in the permitting process. And we will fairly soon be looking at how we go about putting the rubber to the road and actually moving forward with the project itself. And there are 2 ways to do that. The first is a spec bid build model, which is traditional, where the architect puts out specs, contractors will come in and bid, and we'd be obligated to take the lowest qualified bidder. The alternative would be to work through something called state contracting or performance contracting, where different firms would be interviewed, and based upon their experience and their expertise, they would be hired rather than the lowest bidder, and that would include the cost that they would propose for the track. And then they would acquire materials through state contracting pricing. And after a long discussion at the committee level, it's thought that's a far superior approach because it mitigates the prospect of having the lowest bidder having marginally good qualifications as far as a history of installation of tracks or whatever the project happens to be, the bleachers or the whole comprehensive thing. So that's the process that we intend to follow. We've put together a sample RFP that's in the final stages of review, and we hope in the near future to be able to issue that RFP with the idea of attracting firms that do this performance contracting for consideration. And ultimately, we won't have to make a final decision whether it's spec bid build or performance contracting, until we have all the data and all the information together. And then finally, on the track project, one of the suggestions that administration that I'm making is that we consider utilizing this new project as an opportunity to expand sports opportunities for our greatest needs special education students. There is a program called Unified Sports, which is an outgrowth of the Special Olympics, that teams up regular education students and special education students on the same team to do events in track. And then part of our goal will be to get other districts to join us in developing these teams. And one of the things that we thought is that by building the stadium and having special education students with the opportunity to go out and actually compete in a beautiful stadium, to expand the opportunities available to students. And one of the things that I'm suggesting, and that we certainly will talk about more, but I got away with it at the committee level, would be putting in a bocce ball court, turf on the field, because the unified sports students are particularly well suited and, in my experience, very much love that game. And it is an approved event for unified sports. And so and it's not a cost addition, but the idea that we would be able to expand the use of our facilities to accommodate a greater set of our students could be of great value, and one that I hope to be able to consider in the future as we make this discussion. So, Mr. Mon, Dr. Wayak, I don't know if there's other things that I should be adding, but that's what I have as far as the latest update from our work at the facility committee level.
Yeah, I don't think I have much more to add right now, but we do have our work cut out for us. There are deadlines. There are many things to review and get organized, as you mentioned. And, our plan is to move forward as a team to come up with the best solution for this project, which includes cost competitiveness, timeliness, and then all the other agreements that go along with it. So we'll make sure that we present something that's amiable.
Very good.
I have a question.
Yes.
I love everything about your unified sports project. I love everything. My questions would be, A, how much extra would it be to do any of that? And B, would it be its own section of the field, or would it be a section that we transform for those particular sports when they're playing them, and then it would go back to being something else? Or would it be its own designated?
You're talking about the bocce court,
Yeah,
court.
well,
Okay.
any of it.
Okay, good. Well, the events that unified sports have are very much like the traditional events in track. So there would be no real need for modifications. Like they may have, different lengths and, hurdles at different spots, but by and large, there would be no modification of the track facility necessary for the events. The court itself would be, and I think there's only one other in the nation of a high school stadium we would the second in the nation would be, it would be turf like the other turf. So there wouldn't be dirt or anything like that. The turf would be a different color, so the court would stand out, and the thickness or granularity, I'm really not, that's not the right word, but the turf would be such that it would allow for a more steady roll of the ball, as opposed to the traditional turf where it wouldn't roll so well. So it'd be a thicker ply, maybe is what I'm trying to say. And then there would be a removable barrier around the edge of the court, so that, if you rolled it too far, it would stop the ball from rolling, but it could also be removed and then allow for other play to occur.
Would our students be able to, could that be incorporated into gym? Like that there's a bocce ball section of gym class where we can teach our own kids?
I think it would be not only incorporated into gym, but if we played our cards right, there'd be members of the community coming out to play all the time. I would love to see tournaments and sports and events. So just as people would, and we also have to, I think about how we allow the community greater use of our facilities. And once we get that track in there, it's their money that puts it in. And so how nice would it be to have people being able to walk around, play a little bocce ball.
You sold me, I'm good.
And so I think it would be, and to watch a unified sports game is to be inspired.
Okay, sorry, sorry, they just keep coming up.
Yeah.
So would, my daughter has done one of these, like her softball team has done it.
Right.
And so would our students be the ones helping? Like, could that be like extra, I don't know, hours or
They
like
would be part of the
community
team.
service for them?
Everyone on the team would be part of the team. And some members of the team would be our exceptional special education students. Other members of our team would not fall in that category. And I guarantee it would be the best experience that anyone would have on the team all together.
So would it be a volunteer thing then? Our students would be on?
Yeah, they're on a team, like just as you would volunteer to play on the tennis team or the golf team or the track team, you would volunteer to play on our unified sports team. And then we would then make such a wonderful case here that other districts in our region would be, could not say no to joining us. I am.
I just had a couple of questions. On a related note, would the coaching require additional certification at a cost or?
There's a whole, very often, Unified Sports will offer seed money for this. And I think all of our coaches need some form of training with different various things. I think there may be some training involved, but I wouldn't see it as a certificate or anything that anyone who was interested in this wouldn't be able to very easily accomplish.
And I had one other question, only for my own information. Just years ago, I remember there being debate as to synthetic turf and potential health complications. So I'm assuming, and, I don't know much about it, so I'm assuming that has been redressed, or now we've come a long way since then, because that was a long time ago. I remember seeing news reports.
No, I remember too, turf being hard and causing injuries and turns. And there is a metric, G something or other. I forget it. I forget the metric. But part of the spec in the bid is to make sure that the surface has and maintains over time this level of softness, hardness, whatever it is on the turf. That metric is used as a proxy for like safety. So that is very much part of the discussion and the specification that will go into it.
And I hate to say it, but wasn't there something also about malignancy? Like,
Yeah, I think from inhaling.
Yeah, like,
the little grainy.
but I would think by now they'd figured out a way to tap it down more. But I remember there were all these news stories. Yeah.
Yep, actually, that I am not familiar with. I was
So
talking
I just
about,
would ask that we explore that as, I mean, I'm not saying it negates it, but I'm sure by now one would think that the companies that make synthetic turf have figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, the bureaucratic answer would be, well, it meets all standards, but that's not good enough. We'll have to be sure that we specifically address the toxicity. What's the toxicity?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And one of what, Priya, years ago when we were talking about this, first looking at this with the synthetic option turf for one of the concerns the community raised was that, in addition to a community concern, was raised about cost. Because at the time, it was costing more and more and more to be able to dispose of. So installing the field wouldn't be an issue, but disposing of that granulated rubber material, there were fewer and fewer sites willing to accept it. So looking down the road financially to see if that's still a trend or if that has stopped being the case. And there were also at the time increasing municipalities and states and townships, not locally, but perhaps Delaware, Maryland, New York areas that were forbidding any synthetic or rubberized from being installed. And I know that was a community concern at the time, both from, is that going to be continued trend? So is this going to be something that we are going to have to pay to dispose of before its lifetime? And also when it comes time to replace it and to replace the fill, is it going to be at an exorbitant cost that we didn't budget for because there are going to be fewer and fewer locations, companies able to take it and actually recycle or, whatever is done, dispose of it in some way.
Great questions all. That's, I think, part of the reason why it's good to discuss. So
and part of that ties into the toxicity element that Dr. Serene was speaking of.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let's add that to our list for our committee and see if we could get some more precise information. Okay. Any questions on the track?
I still would like to see the track moved outside of the stadium, but I know that's not popular. But since we're having a workshop about it, I'm not on the facilities committee and it's way too late to stay, but I think I've said it before. I still would have liked an option to have the track outside of the stadium by itself, perhaps with a turf field outside of the stadium, a separate, not two turf fields, but I think I would have preferred, because once you have, as I've said before, once you have a full, and especially with the size field that we're envisioning, what Mr. Lysette had reported on last time, you start to get a rather large surface area out there, and then when you add an 8 or 6 lane track on the outside of that yet, I think it actually takes away from the feel of just a good grass field that can be much smaller, so your stadium's on top. And since we're moving the homes, we have the opportunity to move the home stadium actually forward, side of the field, I'm saying, the stands. since you're recreating them, you can move them closer to the away stands, and so therefore you shrink the whole thing down. I think that's an advantage for all kinds, viewing the band, for viewing any event in general. There's a reason you don't see tracks inside of any, vast majority of college stadiums for that reason. And then I also think, to your point, Mike, it's easier to get onto a track for the community that's placed separate, on a separate field that doesn't require you to get in through gates and fences and everything else. And not that you want everybody in the world just stepping onto a track, but I think it's more accessible. It could be closer to the high school at that point. It would be better utilized by the high school gyms as well as the turf field. So that's still my, and I know it's probably too late on that, but that's still my vision of what I think I'd like to see out there.
Great.
Probably greater cost involved because you have turf
Two
there,
fields,
you have
right.
2 fields, but I don't know if it'd be a whole lot, but perhaps it is quite a bit more. If it's quite a bit more, then obviously maybe that's the driving factor between what we're doing. Those were always my thoughts about the way going forward. But I know that's ship has probably sailed.
Well, I don't know. And Dr. Wayoff is asking if you could speak. Dr. Wayoff.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I don't know, Mr. Demick, I think it would require actually the rehabilitation of 2 tracks then, because the track inside the field right now must be replaced.
Well, I think I'd get rid of that track.
Oh, you get rid of that?
I would eliminate the track.
Okay.
I would put a grass field and I'd move the bleachers together. And I think that provides a better facility for us, and it would not be turf. That would just be a grass field. And then I would propose at some point, either at the same time or very close to utilize, I think, the one they've looked at before, which is this field more over here, close to the high school, where you would put a large turf field and surround that with a track. That's my vision for it. But again, I'm not.
Well, and I know
I'm not willing to die on that hill. That's just my thought has always been about it.
Sure. And I think a lot of the permitting issues, which are well underway, have been done with the idea that it was going to be over there. But so let's add that to our list of topics at our next meeting, which, by the way, is canceled for tomorrow for anyone who is in interest, and we'll post this. But the facility committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow is canceled, and we'll resume in 2 Tuesdays from now. Okay.
Jeff, I just note one thing. One of the challenges with the current grass field was the play density, and that comes into it currently being closed off. And the thought was that with the turf field, that area could potentially be open for use more than it is now for that reason. So for what that's worth.
Again, I'm not really looking to make a whole lot more work, and I certainly don't have a problem with the plan.
Well, sure.
I just want to put that.
Sure.
I can't help myself. So
That's
my
fine.
little vision I have in my
And I
head.
think when we
I put it in my
that-
notes, so don't worry.
Yeah, send his notes, and there's a lot in his notes, I will say. But the other thing I think, Mr. Demick, when we were looking at that, then they said, okay, do we have lights, and then do we have a field house, and then do we have bathroom, and do we have all of those other things, which I think doesn't mean it's not possible or not even the better idea, but that was some of the things that were discussed around the issue.
Yep.
Okay.
Could I, in conjunction with the facilities, what is the status then of is this our current focus for we want to call it phase 1, or, at one point there was a number, and I'm certainly not necessarily in favor of all the other things that were out there at one point.
Right.
Just for my own edification, though, this currently is the current focus for an upgrade in facilities in the next 1 or 2, 3 years?
Well, no, there's actually a dual focus.
Is there also AC and cooling?
There is absolutely a very serious focus on what we would describe as mission critical construction projects, largely around roofs and HVAC, where certain of our buildings, when it rains, out come the buckets, and very serious issues about repeated maintenance costs of HVAC units, just time and time again, people having to come to fix them, out of date to the point where it's hard to get parts. So we have certainly a focus on the facilities, on the stadium project, but we have an equally urgent focus on those projects that really are inarguably necessary for us to maintain our facilities and to be decent stewards of our, of our property. Okay.
Yes. Waiting for, think you can hear me? Yes. That's a different presentation.
That's everybody's worst nightmare.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't want to talk.
Now you have to do it. And-
Surprise.
Yes, and just by way of introduction, we have said that we really want our work sessions to have instructional components to them. We've identified two very important goals, that of post-secondary partnerships and ELA. And so we have, those are up tonight. And then also, some of you might have read that our state standardized scores came out. It was in the newspaper, and we have been committed, and we said we will be committed to reporting results to the board. We'll have a major comprehensive report in November and periodic reports along the way, and Dr. Trinkle has kindly agreed to do a presentation on our progress in standardized scores.
Yes, well, Mr. Jordan is getting that up on. Sorry?
I need you to vamp, so just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. So just we'll do the precursor, I guess, to the Future Ready Index, is that these are scores from the 2021 school year. So keeping in mind the impact of instruction, the modes of instruction, student participation, student attendance, staffing, transportation, all of those things were impacted to a varying degree during this school year. Additionally, we too experienced a very large impact on our participation rates for our state assessments last year. And some of our students stepped very first into our buildings just to take a state assessment last year. So keeping that in mind, we will provide that overview to you tonight. The next slide that you would see is about interpreting the data. So when we're taking a look at some of the 2021 assessment scores, we want to acknowledge some of those limitations of participation rates, testing environments, the school closure, and the hybrid learning, all of that year-and-a-half impact on our students. In 2020, no state assessments were given in the spring to our K-12 students. And while we'll focus on these data points as valuable, there are other measurements of student achievement, not just the state assessment, which would be one measurement of our student achievement and progress. Here we go.
You talking about like STAR?
Talking about STAR, we're talking about Acadians, we're talking about CBTs, we're talking about IXL math and ELA, just your normal traditional classroom assessments as well. All of those are done with much more frequency than a one-time state assessment in the spring. So, keeping in mind too, the Southern Lehigh School District, very close to the state average, experienced a 21% decrease in test participation in that last school year. So I think, there we go.
I'll just put you through here.
Thank you. So we'll start off with K-3, which is Hopewell and Liberty Bell. That is grade 3, and in grade 3, we test in ELA and we test in math. So here it's a non-cohort comparison. So when we're testing in grade 3, we really can only test to other groupings of students, not the same grouping of students over a period of time. And we're looking at Hopewell, keeping in mind grade 3, those early indicators of success in ELA, which is why we're strategically and aggressively moving towards that K-3 phonics program and more authentic use of our interventions, which you've heard us talk about previously. So in ELA, you're seeing an 85.5% advanced proficient range. So if I were to compare that to the 18-19 school year, we made some gains. We were about 78% at that point in time. In math, we were showing an 81.7 advanced proficient range. And in the 18-19 school year, we were at about a 77%. So I'll note that Hopewell, while we had about a 10% reduction at Hopewell, the testing environment, the hybrid learning, we still did have some academic gains in student achievement on this assessment, which is a positive and should be celebrated for Hopewell. When we're taking a look at Liberty Bell, we had about a 75.3% advanced proficient in comparison to the previous academic year at about a 79. Again, in math, we'll see 63.5% with a slight reduction there at 78 in the previous testing year. Now, Liberty Bell did experience a 20% reduction in participation. So that additional percentage of students who did not take the assessment could have been a variable here. Again, both schools well above the state performance indicators, which you'll see below that. I also have the participation rates for each grade level there as well. So without generalizing, grade 3 has made gains in advanced and proficient scores in mathematics with a slight decrease in, a gain in ELA in advanced and proficient and a slight decrease in mathematics for K to 3. Not atypical to see different assessment scores between two different schools, but K to 3 systematically we are approaching that from a teaching learning perspective to provide support to those schools respectively. Next slide. So I'll move to the IS. In the IS building, we test in ELA math 4 through 6th grade, and science only in 4th grade. Again, all groups are exceeding the standard growth here, which is a good sign. In ELA, we're taking a look at a 77% advanced and proficient range in comparison to the previous year, about 81%. Again, with a 10 to 15% reduction in participation rate. This is an opportunity for us to track and follow students as they progress through the IS. So we can do a cohort assessment here, which we've already started to do. And we are seeing an increase in advanced scores, an increase in proficient scores, and an increase in your basic and below basic. So we're starting to trend a little bit differently in those below basic and basic scores. In mathematics, you'll see a 55.4% advanced and proficient, and we did have a bit of a hit there at 74% in our previous assessment year. Again, looking at the 17-18 and 18-19 assessment years, we were seeing steady achievement there. And with that gap in the at the end of the 19-20 school year and in the 20-21 school year, we assessed at the end of the last school year, we did see some drops in advanced, a steady growth rate at proficient, but then an increase in below basic and basic. So that would represent the reduction there in that. Taking a look at science, we didn't have too much of a difference in assessments there at an 89.7%. We were at about 93 in the previous assessment year. And again, that's only in grade 4. So it's not a cohort experience. We're assessing students to the assessment, not to a group of students. The middle school. Again, we're assessing in grades 7 and 8 in ELA and math, and grade 8 science only. So in ELA and science, we did meet growth expectations, and in math, we did not meet growth expectations. While we were above the state average in all areas, we did have about a 20% impact in participation rate again at the middle school. So in ELA, we're looking at about a 73% advanced and proficient range in comparison to our previous assessment year, about an 80%. Again, a drop in ELA of students in the advanced outcomes with an increase in proficiency, still above the state average. In mathematics, you'll see a similar target here that we did not hit like at the IS. In the last assessment year, we were just under a 50% advanced and proficient. And in the previous assessment year, we were at 64. Again, seeing the similar trends in students moving through the advanced down to proficient, down to basic and below basic. We saw that similar trend.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I
That's
do have a quick question because thank you for the breakdown of data. It's very digestible. I really appreciate it. One of the things that occurred to me in hearing you talk is we have a much more compartmentalized, homogeneously grouped math program starting in 6th grade. And I'm wondering if the data breakout from the intermediate school, but particularly with the middle school, because you have students who have been assigned to homogeneously grouped classes, have you looked at the analysis of those students who opted to not take the participation rate as compared to which classes? Because that could explain if certain particular groups of math classes chose to opt out of that testing. Have you looked at that correlation yet at all? Or
We're getting there.
okay, that was my question because that's actually an achievable data point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because this is a snapshot in time.
Yeah, exactly, right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we're getting there. And some of the information that I'm sharing you about how students flowed through advanced to proficient is exactly what we're looking at in e-metrics, which is not an easy representation to show you tonight. But it is valuable data that we are digging into as fast as we can. Yeah.
No rush. I just was
yes.
curious and I appreciate it. No, I didn't. That's great.
Because that's actually what's more valuable.
Right, exactly,
Is
exactly.
how we use this data to target individualized student needs.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what we'll take away from this assessment year.
And understanding the why of why this happened and digging down. Thanks.
Exactly. So in science, you'll see, a very similar achievement for student achievement in this advanced proficient, which is at a 76. We are at an 80 in the previous assessment year, which was, remember, 18-19. Like you said, some of this math and some of the data for the math in particular does merit a pause in further disaggregation, and which is what we're kind of doing at this point. We have gotten so far as to take a look at, IS to the middle school of what data points in particular took the biggest drops. And we did notice that it was in geometry, measurement, and data. And now those are typical content areas covered in our springtime, which would have been impacted in 1920 and in our hybrid learning in the last school year. So that's as far as we've gotten to dig into that. And it's important to note that at 2 of the faculty meetings on Friday that I was a participant in, both administrators took advantage of the opportunity to share that information in so much as breaking that down standards wise to our teachers already. So we're already kind of hitting the ground running and taking a look at that. But again, from a curriculum and a building standpoint, again, areas of focus, areas for intervention are on the top of our list for mathematics. The high school, a little bit different of an indicator. So we move away from PSSAs and we move to Keystone Assessment. So it makes the Future Ready Index look slightly different. These are banked scores. So they are banked scores from our current 12th grade class. So anybody who is eligible to take a Keystone Assessment at any particular time, if they score proficient or advanced, it gets banked until their 12th grade year. So if I was a middle schooler in Algebra 1 in grade 8, I'm able to take the Keystone Assessment, and if I'm proficient or advanced, it follows me. So these are banked scores, which is why you don't see scores for ELA. It's our current 12th grade class. That current 12th grade class did not take the ELA assessment because of the school closure, because they would have been in a Keystone course that would not have permitted them to take it till the end of the year. That's why you saw the X publicly on the public data. Just wanted to clarify that in case anybody had any questions on that. But to highlight the high school, they did meet growth expectations in both ELA and science and exceeded expectations in mathematics in Algebra 1. Again, those are the bank scores, pre-pandemic scores. And to highlight too, ELA, any student who didn't take that assessment because of the school closure, if they passed their Keystone ELA course, they were deemed proficient with no requirements for testing. So there was no need to assess them because they had waived those and they weren't here, we weren't in person to take them anyway. So in Algebra 1 and biology, again, they're representing our current 12th grade class pre-pandemic. Mathematics, we were at a 78. And in the previous assessment year, we were right around a 76. So holding steady in student achievement. Same thing for biology, 79% proficient in advanced with about an 82% in the previous year. We should have a better look in about 2025 using this data. So till it kind of catches up with all of the years of waivers and non-required testing areas. So that is our current 9th grade class, which would be 2025. Again, so we're keeping that in mind when we're taking a look at some of this data. Students who didn't participate, students who received and benefited from the waivers, essentially from not having to take the test, not being required to take the test. We will be capturing as many students as we can for retesting when we're able to. We've talked specifically about that at the high school level. Next slide. This is a 3-year look. Since we didn't really have any ELA data, I thought it was important. Mrs. Gariello was kind enough to provide this for me, is a 3-year look at our advanced and proficient scores throughout a 3-year time frame, holding pretty steady for student achievement. What I will highlight, I think, in algebra is that our 68% advanced proficient, 50% of those fell in the advanced category. That is a high number of advanced test takers. Similar trend for biology, actually, at 66%, about 45 were advanced test takers in that assessment area. So a lot of positive outcomes in that as well for the high school. Next slide. This is just kind of a snapshot, which is a summary of all of our key findings, a real quick kind of reference tool, if you will, about what the data actually looks like and what it actually tells us. K-12, we are above the state standard in all content areas. That is a good thing. We did have we went from a 98% participation rate to about a 78 participation rate, which is a 20% hit on average, give or take between buildings. Grade 3 and 4 ELA and math, typical student achievement across time, no real genuine concerns there. Grades 5, 7, and 8 ELA, just a slight difference in the numbers of students performing at a proficient level. And in grade 6, we saw an increase in students performing at a proficient level. Obviously, next slide, grades 5 through 8 math, we did just talk a little bit about that. The data does suggest that we have to pay attention to that. And what I can say is that in a moment, you will see some of the steps that we have actively been taking since we've gotten back into in-person learning here in an accelerated learning plan that has been implemented at the beginning of last year when we went in-person learning and to continue now. But we did see, across those grade levels, we saw a significant impact there. For grades 4 through 8 science, typical academic trends in student achievement, as well as biology and algebra 1. Literature we really can't speak to since we didn't have a cohort of students to take a look at. K-6, just to highlight briefly some of the things that we are doing. This is not a comprehensive list. Obviously, we're doing much more, but these are the ones that I wanted to highlight tonight. That these are actionable steps. So we're in process and in a proactive way to address student learning. We are focusing on the MTSS and child study process. You've heard a lot about us in the previous meetings talk about what we're doing to revamp and revitalize and resurrect some of those things through the MTSS process for student intervention and enrichment, which is the cornerstone of student achievement. K-3 phonics, we are actively developing the professional development for an implementation next year for a phonics resource, K-3. We're using that data, like we talked about just before, to drill down to individualized student needs, because I think that's the bigger takeaway from some of this data. And we're doing that K-12 and having a deliberate, dedicated dialogue towards data and how that impacts our core instruction, K-6. In grades 7 and 8, we have identified a data action planning process that focuses on differentiated instruction, specifically in math, in the areas of mathematics, looking more diagnostically at that data on an individualized student basis, using a tutoring and a seminar to really kind of take that up off the ground. In grades 9 through 12, you'll see here we did utilize some ESSER funding to implement and fold in a writing center and a math lab, and you'll see here that up to current date, we have about 1,000 student visits utilizing support in those labs, which I think is a positive sign. We're using CDTs, our classroom diagnostic tools, in the Keystone Assessment areas for benchmarking, for instructional adjustments and remediation. And we're using our professional learning communities and peer observations to focus on instruction and instructional practices. Those are just highlighting some of the steps that we're taking to address some of the data we looked at. Again, this is a snapshot of student achievement of a testing time last year in May. There is obvious evidence of student achievement. There's obvious evidence of areas we need to pay attention to. We will continue to analyze that. We'll continue to get better at our craft. And we'll own our areas of focus to strategically provide the students what we need so that they can perform and achieve higher. Thank you.
I had a question. Thank
Sure.
you. It was really helpful. I just wanted to ask you a question again. I know you talked a little bit about this between the differences in grade 3 between Hopewell and Liberty Bell. You mentioned that it's that you can sometimes see variation between buildings. Is it atypical to see a consistent difference between buildings in both subject matters? That's one question. I mean, how much of it is attributed to the participation rate difference? And I'm just curious for those reasons because of that participation rate factor, which might skew the data. I wasn't sure whether you had had a chance to look at previous years to see whether this was a trend at all or.
It is. It is a trend. I went as far back as 17, 18 to look, and you can see some of those trends as much as I could get my hands on that information. Sometimes it was going into a different system to kind of add it up and hope that the standard deviation and the variances I was looking at, I was doing the right calculations. But it is a trend. Over a 3-year period, you can see that consistently. There aren't too many differences between Liberty Bell's advanced and proficient, except for that math year, which you could attribute to the participation rate. You could attribute to learning loss. You could attribute to hybrid learning and a shutdown. I think, our more accurate measures of student achievement right now will be that STAR and those other classroom assessments that we're using to really drill down and see where kids need to be and what we need to do.
So 2 related questions, and I guess what specifically within the action plan that you mentioned would attend to that potential trend that we're seeing would be, I guess, my first.
That is part of the MTSS process. We do that for reading and for math.
Right, but if there's a trend with one program not doing as well as the other, I'm just wondering, how do you account for that? If you're treating both the same though, still with the action plan. So I'm just curious about that. And then also, is there any data to support, I guess, the STARS assessment and IXLs as being more indicative of success, student success, as opposed to those that have been chosen by the state of Pennsylvania? I'm just curious if there's a difference.
Yes, and I'll defer to Mr. Cross, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about what STAR and IXL. There are 2 different mechanisms for student growth and achievement used in 2 different levels. So if you don't mind. Yeah.
So our STAR assessment is a universal screening tool, which gives us a prediction of mastery of grade level standards. Excel is more of a diagnostic tool, criterion reference of the standards. I'm not aware of any validity data between the PSSA and IXL, but I do know that the STAR has historically been very well a predictor. Now, I think we have to take into effect the last couple of years, and there may be a reset in their statistical analysis to do that predictions, but we have found that it is a good predictor in the past, and that's why we are very happy to use that as a universal screener.
I'm assuming the STAR,
Apparently it works. I'm assuming that the STAR assessment is used by other school districts as well, right? So why don't they pick that? Just curious. I don't have any background in education, but if it is a strong, why do we stress everybody out about the PSSAs? My background's clearly not in education, so I'm asking a question because I don't know the answer. Not to be difficult, but.
Well, I certainly don't know what the state's logic was in picking DRC, but DRC is also a very reputable assessment tool. They are different styles of assessments. The PSSA Keystone exams are a more complete battery criterion reference, whereas STAR is a predictor. So in 30 questions, they do a statistical analysis to predict mastery of standards. That's quite different than the PSSA and Keystone exams.
Which in STAR, we're doing much more frequently. Right. So we're doing that at, quarterly or more frequently, depending. Whereas the PSSA Keystones are at the end or at one point in time. Sure.
My overall concern is number of grades in the fundamentals of mathematics that are really taking a hit because of what has happened over the past couple of years, and being able to recover from that, because those years are critical in being able to get students up to a level so that when they're in either late years in middle school or into high school, and really deciding what they want to do, and whether they're going to struggle in these programs, that's a big problem. And I think we're going to see it over the next few years in this data. And the question is, how can we really buckle down and get kids to recover from that? And I know you have some things in there for that, but that, I'm just saying rhetorically, that's a big challenge and it's a big concern of mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think because, you mentioned the middle school hit, with math. I mean, that is going to be a time, like you're saying, Steve, that students are going to start to just track out and say, maybe I'm not so good at math and science. I shouldn't do a STEM associated career. It'll dissuade some potential, I think, success in that area. I'm just curious, because it's hard, I think, during the school year I appreciate all the efforts that are being made, I think, to remediate, but I'm just curious whether we would offer, maybe we are already talking about this, I'm just not aware, some type of like summer program that's, geared towards making up certain skills that, like high yield skills that we've noticed are, that we're not doing as well in, based on your analysis, for example, rather than a grade oriented one, but rather just a skill base, so that you could have a mixture of students.
And those are all things that we're considering based on the release.
No, I can't.
That
was my thinking phase. I apologize.
Based on the release of this information, which, we had many discussions leading up to this point, which we receive, students take this assessment in April and May, and we get the results in March, which really doesn't give a ton of lead time for us to be proactive. So we have been having these conversations since I've arrived. I know that they were happening when Mr. Mahan was here. I know that they were happening long before we arrived too, in a proactive manner, to have all things considered, with math being our concern as well.
You saw me thinking about was what I really like about this. The silver lining to this is it's forcing us to really focus on individualized and how to address the individual needs of students in our schools, which is great for everyone, and supporting teachers and giving individualized information on how to support kids. It's wonderful. Perhaps I misunderstood, but there's more meta-analysis to come that you discussed. So perhaps especially at the, I guess, middle school level, do we yet know that the stats are, as Mr. Moen mentioned, do we yet know that the stats are that much decreased from before? Because I heard you saying that it wasn't necessarily comparing a cohort, but also you haven't yet been able to, you just got this data. And you haven't been, so thank you for performing this this level. But as that analysis occurs, perhaps will we discover that there's a correlation between the decreased participation and that decrease in, like, perhaps the individuals who didn't participate correlate to the scores? I mean, we don't necessarily know that this is such a gap to make up at this point. Regardless, we're helping kids learn more. And obviously in classroom is always better, but the meta-analysis is yet to come, right?
Yeah, I think I could not say definitively
Right.
one way or another without breaking that down further. What I can say, even at the IS level in particular, which I walked in and participated in their faculty meeting, that it was broken down by standard with the percent of student achievement. So they had already drilled down that far too, and that's how we came to see consistent with what we were seeing at a 10,000 foot view, geometry, data, and measurement hitting the most of a decrease in student achievement in those specific tested areas.
Okay.
There were other areas too that dropped. Those are the more marked drops that we saw.
Well, I think too, to your point, it's really common sense when you start thinking of the subject matter that's happening. It's new concepts. There's a lot of one-on-one that happens in drilling down into problem solving that happens in a physical classroom than remotely, and it's just not going to happen. They're getting lost. they're lost in space probably with some of the concepts. And then it's just tough to recover from that because what's next? The next thing happens and then you're in deep trouble.
Can you tell me what the participation rate was in previous years?
I can, I don't have that tonight.
Okay.
But, yeah, absolutely. Well, we found that trend, from that last year. We can go back, previous years. So in 18-19, we had a 98% participation rate, a non-testing year of 19-20. And then 2021, we went to about 78 overall. And on that slide deck, you can see building-based participation rates too, but we can take a look at previous years. If we can pull that, yeah.
And I will just offer the thought that with respect, we cannot really overly worry ourselves with chasing PSSA data. These are one-time tests that come at the end of the year over multiple days that really are limited in value with respect to specific actions that we could take in the curriculum. PSSA trends over time are important, but you will not find us hovering over the backs of our teachers saying PSSAs were down 10% or whatever up in any particular year, pandemic or not. The value of them, again, is trends over time, and we'll watch them. But what we have to be able to do is monitor day-to-day instruction, have great faith in the extraordinary talents of our teachers, and support them with well-articulated, deeply trained programs that are established to work, and then measure and focus on the school day and engage our parents and engage our community and work. And over time, the PSSAs will work out. The value-added data will work out. But many times, I've seen places that just perseverate over one little aspect of the PSSA in one particular year, and it's not meaningful. It just really is not. So data is important. We will have an emphasis on data, but we always have to keep data in context and never, ever, ever get hung up on any particular measure or point, but trends over time and focus on the highest quality, most informed instruction with the best possible teachers. And that will get us to where we will be. And with that focus, our PSSAs will be of no worry whatsoever. We'll be leading the state in them, which is actually where we're heading.
Yeah, I agree with that. My big concern is the short-term recovery of the existing cohort. That's my worry. And how do we recover from that over the next, really, you have months in some cases to be able to catch up. Other times it's maybe a couple of years, depending on what year you're looking at. So that's where I'm worried about more so than the PSSA score. I think it shows a little bit, but it's that group that could really be hurt if we can't get some sort of immediate impact. And I think your slides are showing that corrective action happening now, which is critical. So I agree with that, and I'm glad that you're moving in that direction.
Okay. All right, our next public presentation is regarding our secondary and post-secondary partnerships. As the board will recall, that is one of our two goals centered around breaking barriers. And Mrs. Gariello at the high school has been our lead person on this effort. We've had some good things in place. We're growing, and we have much more to come. So I welcome Mrs. Gariello tonight to give us an update on, just as we had ELA last time, we have our second major goal, secondary and post-secondary partnerships. Mrs. Gariello, thank you. Welcome, and stage is yours.
Thank you. Before I start, shameless plug, bye-bye birdie. The kids are running back and forth over here in their costumes. So it's all this week. Come please and come out and see. They've been working since November on it. So we would love to see all of you. You're more than welcome. It really sounds great. So, all right. So it's my pleasure to be working with the high school team on community partnerships. And we've really broken this down into 4 different areas: academic partnerships, social emotional partnerships, dual enrollment opportunities, and then career counseling partnerships. So I'm going to take them one at a time. Academic partnerships, we have started a little bit this year. We're very excited about what we're going to be adding next year. St. Luke's, we had a wonderful meeting with St. Luke's. And St. Luke's, in addition to being our athletic trainers and providing some behavioral health supports, also they've been wonderful in providing lots of in-class support, presentations, demonstrations, nurses, physical therapists, doctors, surgeons, we've had them in and out of our building all year long, and we're excited to be expanding that opportunity next year. They're going to be having our kids go to the Fountain Hill Hospital, to Vanell for training, which is on the south side of Bethlehem. It's, I guess, for robotic training, I'm not even sure. But students are going to be invited to come and watch some of these trainings and participate with the trainers. There's a whole list of kids interested in doing some cadaver dissections. And those kids have to be chosen, and they have to apply and write essays and things. And the anatomy and physiology and kinesiology genetics teachers were so excited. They were geeking out when we were talking about this. But there's a lot of wonderful opportunities coming our way through St. Luke's this year already, but next year even more. So they've offered shadowing opportunities and internships and a lot of career, and not just in the medical field, but also in the business and marketing and management and accounting and supervision. So there's a lot of really wonderful opportunities for our kids that we've already used with St. Luke's and more to come. I also have to give a shout out to Lehigh University. There are two professors, and one is a material science professor, Dr. Siddha Kutkar, and he actually came from Caltech, I believe, and his direct mentor was a Nobel Prize winner in physics and chemistry. And he's brought his lab here to Lehigh, and part of his research has to include outreach. So he has come to our school and made presentations. He is taking our kids onto Lehigh's campus in May, and April, May, we're still nailing down the dates. Their kids are going to be able to go into his lab and see the experiments that he's doing. And they will also have a tour of Lehigh's campus, and they will also be part of the engineering expo at Lehigh. So that was one wonderful opportunity. And then Dr. Larry Tartaglia, who's a biology professor, he reached out to us and was interested in coming to school. So he's coming in April in about a month, and he's going to be doing some lunch and learns with interested students. He's bringing undergraduate students who are currently undergoing research at Lehigh. And he's going to be meeting in panel discussions. He's bringing a whole team of his students. And he focuses on medical school and medical, like the pathway to get to medical school and what undergrads need to know. And I have asked them to bring some women scientists as well, because our numbers, to be honest, drop off in our high-end science classes and math classes and engineering classes. Predominantly, currently, it's male-dominated environment right now here at the high school. We're trying to break that. So I did want to make sure that there were some women scientists coming as well with these professors. So Lehigh has been a wonderful partner. Just out of the goodness of their heart, they reached out to us, I reached out to them, and this is what we have started this year. We hope to continue it in many years to come. Also, I know you can't read this, but we had a ton of judges. We had over 300 students participate in our science fair last week or 2 weeks ago. And we had chemistry, biology, physics, electricity and magnetism, genetics, kinesiology, all different types of classes represented at our science fair. But in order to make it worthwhile for the kids, we needed to have judges. And so we had judges from DeSales University, Lehigh University, and of course our fabulous Southern Lehigh teachers from kindergarten all the way up to high school. So we had a lot of people that came, and we had PhD students and professors. And so it was a wonderful experience because the students were actually judged, critiqued, given feedback on how to improve their work. They were questioned, they had to do presentations. So not only was it research and scientific experimentation, it was they had to defend their ideas and explain their ideas. So I needed to say thank you to all the science fair judges out there. Moving on to social emotional partnerships. Again, St. Luke's will be partnering with us and continuing their behavioral health supports, tier 1 interventions, parent workshops. They've been great. This is part of what they've been doing for a long time. We're excited to partner with them, and our school physician, Dr. Gibson, also was very gracious in providing many presentations throughout this past year as well. Lehigh Valley Health Network currently is providing school-based counseling here at the high school and some of the other schools. This year, our counselor is here full-time, which is wonderful. We've kept her very busy. She maintains a caseload of 35 students, and she's seen 46 so far this year. Most students last in her counseling sessions from 6 months to a year. They can be discharged as early as 6 weeks if the kids are doing better, but she likes to make sure that they're doing really well before she discharges them. And we're also lucky to partner with the Caron Foundation. The Caron Foundation comes in once a week, on Wednesdays, and they provide small group support groups, and it runs from nicotine cessation and vaping cessation to anger management, teen issues, grief and loss, stress, resiliency skills, stress management. So all kinds of different groups, changing families for students going through divorce. And so we're very excited to have these organizations. We really have a tremendous support system, in addition to our child study team, in addition to our SAC mentors who are teachers and doing a fantastic job, in addition to our fantastic counseling team. We have all of these services for kids. So we hope that, and we think that the kids are taking advantage of these services, and we hope that we can continue to partner with these wonderful organizations in our community. Next are career partnerships. We have brought in the Workforce Initiative Board and Career Link. They come in on Tuesdays and they counsel students. So far, they just started in January, and I did briefly speak to this, but so far there have been about 38 students that have worked one-on-one or in very small groups of 2 or 3 with the career counselors that come in. They do assessments and career counseling, exploration, research, resume building. They do mock interviews, and they also will help them find and guarantee them to find after school work, summer jobs, internships. So they really have done a phenomenal job. They help the kids write resumes and fill out applications. So they've been a huge partner. The Manufacturer Resource Center, we have had them in for the PA Dream Team, and the Dream Team comes in and works with our classes, and they present usually STEM-related fields and opportunities. What's cool about manufacturing, I know happens at the middle school. And then the Manufacturers Resource Center also has a humongous, vast video library that we use for students to explore different career fields. The Workforce Initiative and Career Link actually use the Manufacturers Resource Center videos when they're counseling kids, so they work very well together. And we have a meeting in May to discuss setting up a STEAM club at the high school, which is STEM plus art. And then we were just contacted by two local organizations, the Broccolante Manufacturing Group. They're going to be taking students on April 22nd to tour their facilities, high-tech facilities, work in aerospace and manufacturing. And they're going to have a plant tour and Q&A with a lot of their different employees. And then the Stanley Black & Decker group reached out, and we're going to start working with them in the fall. We've had a couple meetings, and they also are willing to come to the school, make presentations, and also take the kids on tours of their facility in Allentown. There's another organization that's in the works that we hope to get set up as well. So DEMCO has also graciously offered to take our students on tours. A National Manufacturing Day, I think it's in October, like October 22nd or something like that. And we hope to increase these career partnerships and with community members. Okay. And then, of course, our dual enrollment. Now, we started this last year and we've expanded it this year. Currently, we have University of Pittsburgh, and this, I'm proud to say, is these courses have been approved by our teachers to teach. And I would put our teachers up against any. They are teaching the approved curriculum. They had to be vetted and cleared by the universities. And so currently, University of Pittsburgh, we are teaching 4 of their courses at $75 a credit, which is a bargain. Talk about decreasing obstacles and decreasing barriers. Seton Hall, we offer 27 credits or 27 courses at $100 a credit. And we're in process of setting up partnerships with Lehigh County Community College and Penn State Lehigh Valley. Penn State Lehigh Valley would be more an on-campus experience. Lehigh Community College, we're hoping to try to work through an associate's degree, where our kids can be, by the time they graduate high school, can actually leave with an associate's degree in general studies. So just some numbers, we have 31 students enrolled in our PIT courses, 184 enrollments, because the same student might be in multiple courses through Seton Hall, but 184 enrollments in Seton Hall. And I think that's about it. Any questions?
I just think all of this is pretty great. And the more we can have dual enrollment and partnerships with external entities, I think it enhances the learning experience and gives students a lot more visibility to what's happening in the world and help them make choices in a valued way.
Thank you.
I just had one question. So for the group, the things that you have to be chosen for, is there a strategy on how you're going to choose which student can go if there's a multiple that want to go?
So we are opening it up to any students in STEM related. For the tours, you mean, like on the?
I think it was the first part, the Lehigh.
Oh, that's open to anybody. So they come here.
So they don't have to be chosen.
No. Now, the on-campus tours, we do have to limit to 1 bus full of kids just because of the expense of the transportation. And so the teachers who are teaching our STEM related, our engineering courses, our physics, electricity and magnetism courses, our computer science courses, those are the ones we're targeting first. Anyone in those classes would be invited first. And then if there's open seats on the bus, then we can open it up to anybody. Those are the teachers who are chaperoning, so they're taking their classes. Any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Guriello.
Thank you.
And our message when we meet with the Chamber of Commerce or with any group, any business, or is that Southern Lehigh is open for business. We have the best resource that any business could want, and that is our students, our partners, in addition to our students. So we're very excited over the great work that has been done, and we look forward to much more work along the lines. So we're very excited about that. So any other questions?
I just add that Dr. Mann was at the chamber meeting and networking to expand some of these opportunities with our Lehigh Valley Chamber. So I saw him there, and he was in the process of doing that.
Well, every one of our administrators, and I put Mrs. Guriello and Dr. Trinkle at the top of this list, at every possible interaction to say, hey, how can we help you? And very often there's a way that turns around to helping our students. And so we all have to be emissaries. I know Mr. Mond is working to get kids in his place. And so great things are happening. We are all, again, open for business here in Southern Lehigh. Okay. And then a quick update, and this is more on the financial than the instructional, on our literacy initiative. As we mentioned last time, our group has selected foundations, and this is our teachers, very well received, very excellent program. We're going to be implementing in the fall, but one of the promises we've made to our teachers is that while we expect them to be all in their work and supporting this with their kids, we as a district owe them to be all in with respect to the support and training and materials that we provide to them. And it happens that we are doing this at exactly the right time because the federal dollars we have reserved for one-time expenses such as these. And so when we look at what we need to accomplish here, We need materials for our phonics program, manipulatives, charts, boards, books, all kinds of things. We are expanding beyond the typical materials to purchase what we call geodes, all right, which are decodable text books that our kids will read that are perfectly in alignment with what they are learning in phonics at the time. So it brings to life the phonics work with a literature component. And then critically, we have to be committed to provide the training to our teachers to be able to be expert at this. Because I think the worst thing we can do was have boxes of stuff show up in their room with a lack of training and empowering them to do the great things that those high quality materials are intended to do. So when you look all told at the costs, it's $167,000 for our initial startup. That breaks down to about $68,000 in the actual phonics materials, $18,000 in professional development, and $82,000 for those geodes, all right, those books that we're looking to buy for all of our students in all of our classrooms. The good thing, though, is that all of that $167,000 is covered by federal grants that were put out specifically for the purpose of learning recovery. And so we have been very, very cautious in how we have spent this money. Just as we focus our internal efforts on our goals, we also are focusing our funding to support the goals. And so the funding breaks down to $5,000 from the donation that Dr. Trinkle was able to secure, $9,000 from the ARP 7% set aside. If you remember, we had a deadline on that. Mr. Cross was very instrumental in making sure that we had that paperwork done. $54,000 in the ARP EASER funding, and then $18,000 for the training in Title II, which is traditional federal funding. So the cost of our phonics program is covered. Now, we've made very clear that the phonics program is not the be-all, end-all, but rather the first step as a supplementary program. Next year, we're going to be working very hard with our staff, our teachers, our administrators, and the board in identifying a core program. All right, and we have remaining about $280,000 in federal funding that will help offset the cost of that program next year. And again, we think that this is the ideal way to spend our federal funds. It is focused on a laser focused on a district initiative, and one that we think will go a long, long ways in increasing student achievement for all of our students wherever they fall. So again, I'm very excited about that, and I just wanted to, convey to the board the financing of it, and to let the board know that we are proceeding full speed with implementation of this for the fall.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. How about if we take a 7-minute break? Stretch. It's good for you.
All right.
Everybody back? Okay. Almost. Okay, so we'll continue, Dr. Mann.
Thank you. The next item, I don't think will take a long time, but I just wanted to bring up the idea of the comprehensive plan. And there are two sides to this story. The first is we are absolutely convinced of the value of strategic planning. And hopefully in our presentations and the work that we do, that comes through, and if it doesn't, it should. However, there is something called a comprehensive plan that is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education every 3 years or so from school districts. And Southern Lehigh has applied, and I don't blame them for a second, I did the same thing, has applied for extensions for completing its comprehensive plan. And those extensions have expired, and here we sit needing a comprehensive strategic plan in pretty much no time at all, June, right? So so there is, and this is like a multi-year usually effort. And so I'm going to say that we absolutely will meet our obligations. And the plan itself is formulary, it's template driven, it's very much a construct of a bureaucratic Department of Education as opposed to something that's very authentic. At least that's my observation of it, having done a number of them in the past. And so I come here tonight to offer a suggestion to the board in that you hold us to the highest possible standard for the quality of our strategic planning, but at the same time, you allow us to develop a document that is street legal with respect to a comprehensive planning document that we owe to the state in a couple months here. So we will go through and make sure that we have the proper goals and that the boxes are checked and the format works. But I'm concerned that we do not have the time to go through a typical comprehensive planning process that would normally take 12 or 18 months. So I bring that to the board's attention and ask for perhaps your forbearance because we're in a bit of a time crunch here as far as being able to put together a meaningful plan over the course of a short time, which is not to say we aren't interested in strategic and goal planning. So I throw that out for your consideration.
Districts to apply for extension, and how many years will an extension apply for?
Well, I think we did a series of extensions. Yes, the question from Dr. Wayock is, what were those extensions? How long were they? And Dr. Tringle, I don't know if you could help out with that one. But
What I do know is that the plan expires in June of this year, which means we would have to have a plan in preparation, in view for at least 28 days so we would have to hit that by June 1st. So we are in our third year, and it expires June 30th. So that's, as far as extensions, at this point, we're just at the expiration of our current plan.
So we haven't asked for an extension here.
At this point, we're not, it is expired. Any extension we would have had already been addressed. It already been utilized.
Yeah.
And having been being involved right now in 2 different schools for comprehensive plan work right now in Bucks County, it's a long process. So hopefully you can put something together that, of course, meets the criteria.
Right. It will have a meaningful plan, and it will reflect all the goals that we're trying to accomplish. But as far as broad-based community partnerships and out to the places and all of this and rewriting the mission and vision statements and all that, we could accomplish it, but there would be a very high opportunity cost because there would be other things that would be more important that we would not be doing.
When is the plan due?
June 1st.
So if administration and staff accomplish that plan for Department of Ed purposes, could we have that plan reviewed by at least this group?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, and perhaps with the community as well in September.
We'll have regular updates between now and June to the board about what we're doing, the goals we're selecting, which will be no surprise from things that we've talked about already. But as far as the overall comprehensive, very, very thick book-like thing that sometimes comes out of this, we're just not able to produce.
Well, first off, I will send you a sympathy card for not having this started before you started here. It's unfortunate. And sometimes the intermediate units are involved in helping to proctor and whatnot. Is this something where they have the ability to provide some faster track assistance to get you over the finish line?
And I think we'll be fine getting it over the finish line. We know what we want to do, but there's just a degree of formality and.
So we're basically gonna get more of a simplistic form initially, like an outline, is what you're
Yes.
saying, and then we
Yes.
will build upon it.
They sometimes call it like a framework, might be a good word, right? So we will have a very good framework for the very good work we plan to do. But if we were to enter our plan in a beauty contest against other plans, it may not show up to be the fanciest looking. But we'll have a good plan, and we certainly will have excellent strategic planning going forward.
Would you say typically, Dr. Mann, this would be started about a year in advance? 12 months,
At minimum,
At minimum.
usually I would say 18 months.
18 months?
18 months in advance.
Yeah, yeah. And just to remind the community, I appreciate, yes, this is catch up and we understand why you have to work within that framework and thank you for doing so. You do what you can with what you have. But just to remind the community, in the past 12 months ago, we were faced with, we didn't have a superintendent, we didn't have an assistant superintendent. We were under a contract negotiation and teachers had sacrificed every last thing they had. And they're a part of this process, a very important part of this process. So that's part of the explanation why that just was not a feasible thing. And did you say you made the wise decision of kind of an extension at your old district as well?
This is no reflection on anybody, and everybody was busy with lots of things.
Right.
And if there's any negative reflection I'd like to cast, it's more toward the state capitol and the gang there, who have perhaps not really understood the challenges that are being faced and saying, we need this phone book-like document because we do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So
sense.
please, no, I could not agree more that as every district in the Commonwealth is just trying to keep their places afloat, the strategic planning was not at the front and foremost of anybody's mind, for sure.
Yeah,
Dr.
we were
Trinkle.
struggling with pandemic coordination and thanks for that. Appreciate that.
Dr. Trinkle, when was the first year that was due? Was that 2018 or 19?
So it was a 3-year plan.
Yeah.
Expiring in 22. All districts in this phase got
Yeah.
that extension. So we're just right at the cusp of that. So I
The
think it's
earliest at
2000
which that would have been submitted was when?
I think it was 2018.
18, that's what I figured. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we'll have something good for you, all right, but just with an asterisk, if you don't mind. So then moving on to number 7, the board members who were here over the summer might recall in working with the interim superintendent, identifying a need to update district policy and administrative procedures. And I'm fairly sure, signed up for a service with the Pennsylvania School Boards Association to begin a 2-year process to revamp the policies of the district. And associated with the policies would be administrative guidelines. So a policy would, in broad strokes, talk about the direction and rules and rules that any particular issue would require, and then the administrative guidelines would be how to practically implement that at the high school level or the elementary level or at the special ed level. And so we are now, and I asked at the time that we just hold off on the initiative until we have our feet underneath us in order to do this well and thoughtfully and in a way that brings the greatest value to the school district. And so PSBA reached out to us, which is a euphemistic way to say they sent us a bill for this. And we called them up and say, just wait a minute. This is a 2-year process. We haven't gotten started. Just hold off on that. But that prompted me to come to the board to say, hey, this is something of value. It is something that ultimately we would like to do as an administration because we think it would be helpful. It is very work intensive. Mr. Pigeon will be overseeing the initiative should we move forward with it because policies relate across the district, but many actually are HR people related. And so the idea would be that if we move forward, that we would develop a process, very much likely bringing to the work session policies for consideration and discussion. Then if they clear the work session, we would then move to a first reading at the next voting meeting. Then we would have follow-up discussion at the next work session and then move toward final approval at the following meeting. But it would be a cycle because in every work session, we'd have a new one and then we'd be voting on new ones. And so it would be like an ongoing cycle. The idea would be that we would send all of our current policies to PSBA. They would review them and generate new updated policies and administrative regulations for our consideration. And so it would be a work, it would be a 2-year effort to undertake. And I would be very interested in the board's thoughts about, is now the time? Is this something we would like to do? Is something we want to defer for a while? So I raised that issue with the board and look for your guidance.
So do we only have 2 years to do it with PSBA?
Yes.
So we would kind of have to get started on it.
Well, our clock is not started. So once we got the bill, I said, just stop right there. You don't think, and then they graciously said, oh, sure. Well, it hasn't started yet. So it's not started. We're not on the clock. But the question is, should we get ourselves on the clock and get this process going right now, or maybe defer for a while into the future?
How do these resource conflicts work with respect to some of the other immediate things that are happening with regards to cleaning up and getting our house in order, so to speak, for plans and administration and budget and strategic plan, the comprehensive plan now, and the construction? Is this something that we should think about pushing off for a little bit just to get our feet under ourselves?
Yeah, that's the question I've been asking myself. I knew for sure that this was not something that we would even want to consider until around now. Now I think is the earliest window that we would fairly be able to take it on. If the board would like us to move in that direction, we certainly will, and we'll be successful with it. But that's not to say we couldn't start over the summer, we couldn't start in the fall. So we're ready to go when the board is ready to go. But to your point, Mr. Mono, we have lots going on right now.
I would echo that in a form. Basically, I think that we should prioritize some of the issues and topics we've already discussed. And if you feel that you can't allocate adequately to prioritize those and do this, then I would say we wait at least a short amount of time and reassess after the comprehensive plan. Perhaps that could be a landmark or a timeline.
I mean, frankly, at this point, you've got a virtually entire new staff in many ways that are still working to get things moving and just let the dust settle from everything. And I frankly think, these other things are significantly important, and we have to right the ship on those things before we start getting into some of these policy changes that can happen, but later. That's, I think, the way I see it right now, unless I'm missing something.
Why don't the staff give us a recommendation in terms of time frame to get started?
And right, and the other issue too is that this would consume a lot of the bandwidth of our work sessions. And I'm so excited about this forum and the way this is unfolding. At least I hope that this will work well. So perhaps maybe we'll look to say at the start of the fall of the year, and then as we move through the year, we'll be able to go at it. Between now and then, we'll just race to get as much done as we can, and then we'll look forward to maybe taking it up in the fall.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. If you have some preemptive, proactive work that you can do to get moving in the background without having to have the time ticking and invoices and
Right.
people jumping down your back for, milestones and whatnot, I think that might be pertinent.
So, Mr. Pigeon, how about the fall? We'll start in the fall, and we could maybe communicate back to PSBA that we'll be enthusiastic partners, but just not right now.
Do they have a recommended process?
There is.
And what is the typical length of time for the process?
2 years.
Okay. And can we prioritize the policies? Or is that something they do?
Yeah, we can prioritize it. Now, I think there would be a logical sequence, like there's the zeros, the 100s, the 200s. But to the extent that we have emerging issues that require policy insight, the latest policy, we could certainly substitute those policies in any particular month or cycle that we're going through.
And then for the record, I just want to make it clear that policy adjustments and review and structure is really important because we have a significant lack in getting that to the point where it should be. So it's not as if it's a checkbox on a list. It's something that needs to be revamped. So that's it.
Yeah. And one of the things that I will say in the fall, repeatedly, that I've just kind of learned from having done this process is that we have to be sure that the perfect does not become an enemy of the good. Because we will be able to sit and debate on so many different lines and so reasonable debates on so many different things. But, we really have to say, is this an improvement in the direction we want to go? Can we live with this? Good, let's get to the next one. Because otherwise we could get bogged down. This process is dangerous, could be dangerously bogged down. And so, but again, that's a preview of what we'll be talking about in the fall. And I think it'll be an excellent opportunity for this board to weigh in on its most important function, and that is setting policy and direction for the school district in a way that's thoughtful and not rushed, and is, I think, a good opportunity. So maybe the fall then, shall we?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I agree with Mr. Mon. It's important, and that I think we had identified, that we had issues in our policy and bringing it up to speed. So I think it's a need. The only thing that I would say, and the reason I was critical of the idea when it was proposed, I don't think PSBA is the right partner for it. I've not been impressed with, I wasn't impressed with some of the policy that came out of PSBA over school board meetings. And so sometimes I think you have to look at the partner that you're partnering with, and is it an appropriate one? I've never been a big fan of PSBA long before the national nonsense that went on. So I certainly, I'm concerned about, not that we would turn it over, but obviously, to your point, I don't really feel like having to go through a fine tooth comb either with every one of these. And if again, I'm just one of 9, I'm suspect of the partner. So that would require me to go through with a fine tooth comb everything that comes out of PSBA. Because I don't, most things that come out, I think you said it earlier, most things that come out of Harrisburg, and I know that they're not government, but the statewide stuff isn't always what's best for us here. So I would hope that perhaps we have always done our policies in-house. I know PSBA, I know we get guidance from, I'm not saying we create all of our policies, but we certainly, in my memory, have never had a all-encompassing review of suggestions from another partner on going through. And so I may not be in the majority on this, but I just want to at least put that out
that's
there.
fair.
So before, just before you get the idea that there isn't any pushback on that.
Yeah.
So
I agree, in the timing.
Are there other resources besides PSBA?
So I think that
Very
might
little
be the problem that you face, because they really, this is their niche.
Right, and that's my concern.
Yeah.
Because I just noticed what comes out of a lot of policy organizations like that have a lot of loaded ideas in it, and I don't really feel as a board member sitting here trying to catch things that I have a concern about. You're right. It's a catch-22 to some degree. I don't have another organization. I wish there were. That's the point. You don't have competing organizations. You have PSBA in the state. So that's them, and that's what they propose. But I'm always wary. That's just me. Right. That's my concern about PSBA sort of running our policy review.
Dr. Bain, if I might. PSBA is the well-known Pennsylvania policy deriver for school districts. There are many, many different formats of developing policies for school districts, ranging from we do it ourselves in-house, ranging from we have a standing policy committee that goes through everything with a fine-tooth comb, ranging from we kind of look at PSBA, but then we really make it our own and really even change the structure of how it looks, and take out what we like and add in what we want, and so forth and so on. Typically it involves your solicitor reviewing it just to make sure anything that you want to add or take out is actually still technically statutorily correct. But
you don't need to necessarily be bound by PSBA's recommendations and their policies. And very often, as I think you're aware, they give you choices and options even within their policy. And they say, you know, pick one of the 5 choices of that you're going to adopt as your school district's policy. But yes, we often review PSBA policies and make subtle changes that you only get when you look at it with a fine-tooth comb. But they are important so that they reflect your district's preferences.
And then we're on to the last topic on our agenda tonight, and that is that of signs, classroom signs. And, oh, I'm sorry, budget. How do we, it's just the budget, Mr. Pepe. So part of me, yes, all right.
Yeah, and it's like, what's up?
I'm sorry, Mr. Pepe.
Well, actually, thank you, Dr. Mann. When it comes to the budget update, I'd like to direct your attention to a couple of places that we've been doing some work, starting with our website. I've gone and updated the budget portion of the website under the business services to include the presentations that were made. I've also gone on to the information for taxpayers and added some additional links and information on there as we're going through the budget process that I feel will be helpful. If you remember last month, seemed like last week, the presentation, I was talking about the budget timeline, and true to form, we are now in the massive work session in the business office, and I've been working with our staff accountant, Ms. Williams, and we have been meeting with all of the building principals and area district administrators for various aspects of their budgets. And we've been going through and asking a lot of detailed questions and not just looking at what's in the budget for this year, but looking back to see how the actual spend has been and going through a line item accounting of each of the areas. And that's really zero-based budgeting at its best, to ensure that we're not just budgeting something because we spent X last year, and or if we still had money left, we're asking for that again this year. And I have to say, the building principal's been awesome. The administration's been great. We've had a lot of good discussion. It's very helpful to me, you know, coming in from the outside. I get to ask a lot of the questions that perhaps people were taking for granted. And as we go through, we found areas where we can actually reduce some of our expenditures, which we need to be doing to get in line with the revenue that I was talking about before. Moving onward, the focus right now is actually starting to look at the revenue side and look at how we actually fund the budget from the various tax implications, whether it's the EIT tax or the realty transfer tax or interim revenues. A lot of focus on the millage rate, which, you know, that will be coming to you in April. One of the areas that I'm very interested in is the millage support and what's going on. Like as you drive up down the road, you see the new Wawa is up and running. That should be more additional revenue coming in to the district. The McDonald's is slated to come open in, I think, the next week or two, if it hasn't already been open. You know, in even areas like the Goddard School, I think Old Sauk in phase 1 and phase 2, these are all developments that will hopefully bring in more tax base for us and additional revenue to support the overall expenditures. As far as the actual expense side, we're pretty much at this point have gone through all of the budgets. There's still just a few outstanding. One of them, Mr. Rohrbach, is here. He's on like day 3. And, you know, I appreciate that you recognize how new everybody is. And we had the same conversations that you were alluded to this morning. We're talking about prioritization. One of the things in each of the conversations that I'm having is how everything materially comes back to the budget. And there's a budget implication. So we really do need to be forward thinking and planning, not just for next year, but a 5-year outlook, a 3-year outlook, depending on what it is. So if we're talking comprehensive maintenance plan, we're going to be looking at what maintenance activities we're going to be doing over the next 3 years to hopefully get to a point where we're not putting fires out, but we're simply taking care and maintaining the properties that we have. And ultimately, that allows us to put more dollars back into the classroom, and that's the business we're in. So I'm really pleased with the work that I've seen throughout the district in preparation for budget. And again, as we ask the questions, you know, a lot of times it comes down to try and think creatively, try and think flexibly. How can you add the program you're looking and support it with perhaps a program that doesn't have a high return on the investment, or it doesn't, you know, give us the value add today that perhaps it did in prior years. Therefore, eliminate it as we're moving forward, so you're not just constantly add to the load. So that's pretty much where we're at. We're on track. And again, I thank everybody for their help in working towards that goal. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Now the last item.
Yes, now the last item. Thank you, Mr. Pepper. The next issue is is regarding classroom signage. And I want to begin by saying that this issue is fraught. It is fraught in that just the idea of asking for a sign to be taken off the wall is a significant issue. Just as the thought that a sign that's on a classroom wall should be better in a different setting in the classroom wall, that's also a serious issue. And so the idea is that we want to try to balance various rights in a way that is thoughtful and that is respectful and that ultimately has the best outcome for students. And so the issue comes up in response to concerns that were raised within the district about signage. And the problem we face, right, is that we cannot leave such important decisions, right, to the whim of an administrator or a principal or a superintendent, that we have to have a plan as to how to address this issue. We have to have guidance, we have to have a policy, all right? Because while we absolutely trust, all right, and respect our teachers' decisions, and we know that they do great work, we have no guidance that we've given to teachers with respect to what signs should or should not be on their walls. And we also have to be open to the prospect that there could be signs that are inappropriate on our walls. And so, you know, for example, a partisan sign that says vote for this candidate would be an obvious example of a sign that I think should not be there. But yet we don't have a policy or guidance or any type of directive that would allow us to differentiate for a sign for vote for this candidate versus, you know, some innocuous sign that may not be directly related to the curriculum, although a welcome sign in the classroom nevertheless. And so I thought it important to begin this conversation, not with votes or determinations, but rather a conversation among board members as to, again, how to approach this challenging topic. I've distributed, I think you might have on yellow paper, a policy, not that I'm sitting here saying recommended. In fact, I don't like this policy, but it's the one that I was able to find that addresses it. And also, just by extension, since we first began discussing this issue, we've seen that not only in some districts are challenges being made on particular signs in the classroom because of, for example, an alleged political leaning, but also we are now seeing in our region and in our nation challenges being made to books and libraries over the appropriateness of their content or their age level appropriateness. And I think we also have to be prepared for those types of concerns being raised. And in the end, it's better to prepare in advance to be ready than to be responding to a challenge in a way that's like on an ad hoc basis that is really open to creating even greater division than these types of issues already raise in our community. So that is just my introduction to the topic. We do have, and there might even be some extra, a draft policy that again, here we are. A draft policy. And do we have some extras? Do we have any extra? And so the draft policy speaks about, like what we would like not to do is say, all right, the only thing you have on your walls is strictly curriculum related, which comes down to, number lines and alphabets. All right, because that would be a sterile classroom. But we'd also would like to be sure that, our classrooms do not have signs up that are, for example, partisan in nature, like vote for this person or that. And there's a big, wide gray area in between. And that, I think, is the inherent challenge that we face. And so this particular policy says, look, we recognize that we want teachers to decorate their rooms with materials that are related to the curriculum, but also recognizing that they can make the room, and the word used is have their own classroom aesthetic. All right, which is I think the word that provides some flexibility. And then, for signs and photographs and decorations that either generate concerns, be it complaints or just observation from administration or colleagues, whatever it happens to be, then the first decision maker on that issue would be the building principal, ultimately coming back to then the superintendent on appeal as far as the appropriateness of the sign. Now, again, that's not a position that anyone would want to be in, myself included, to be the arbiter of what stays on the wall and what doesn't. But again, that's what's called for in the policy. Maybe we could just begin the discussion there.
Could I, thank you for that explanation of the item. Could I ask also as a precursor to this, since it deals with teacher classroom aesthetic and building their learning environment, is this the first step, or has this conversation already taken place with teachers about how they would like to see this policy shaped? Because it would seem to me that since we sitting here in this boardroom are not nearly as involved or aware of what is happening or how classrooms aesthetics are being built, I would want to see what the teacher input is, how right now what their understanding is of expectations, one, how that has been established in the past, how we have gotten so far to this point, their view on that and their view for improvement or changes, or how they would like to see this policy be shaped.
And I've had conversations with our association on the topic. And I've had conversations with individual teachers. And my sense is that, and again, correct me if I'm going off track, but teachers want to have the flexibility to put up on their walls what they like, and they have good professional judgment, and they don't want administration weighing in on what should or should not be on their walls. I think that's roughly about where they want to be. In conversation, I think there's some recognition that it's conceivable that, even given that parameter, a small number or a sign may land on a wall that might not be there, but overall, there's just not excitement, as I would fully recognize, of having people putting up or putting down signs on, from an administrative point of view, clearing signs in the classroom.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing you say is, I'm sorry, was that it?
Me.
Oh, okay.
Moving the microphone to speak. Go ahead.
So I'm hearing, so this is the starting point of this conversation in the boardroom, is what I'm hearing you
Very much. Well,
say then?
apart from, we've had, rumblings of problems, but really this is the first conversation that we're having about, apart from informal conversations and concerns that were raised in response to calls that we're getting. This is really the kickoff of because we're not in a good position to do much right now because we don't have policy in place.
What's the current complaint process for a public member or a parent who's objecting to art or a sign or a display in a classroom? Is there a process now for complaints?
There is a broad policy to issue complaints in the 900s that I think could be as involved, like, I'm unhappy with the cafeteria food. I don't think we should have this textbook. We should have that textbook. The transportation, my bus stop is too far from my house. So there's a broad complaint process, but we do not have something that is so sensitive and needs such refinement as talking about, what goes up and what goes down with respect to speech and captive audience. So while we do have a complaint process, it does not capture complexity of this particular issue.
And what is the complaint process, really briefly?
I think just fill out a form and submit it to, I think, the building principal.
And the decision maker with
Is-
regard to the complaint?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it ultimately can get approved, appealed to the board. But
Okay.
I think it's like the lowest level would be probably the building administrator or the special admin administrator or the facility director, whatever it happens to be. And it would work its way up. Yes, yeah.
There we go. Okay, yeah, I got the button. I think, so I've been here the longest, I think. I've not seen this be an issue at Southern Lehigh during the time that I've been here. As you said, I guess recently there's been some issues but I think on the whole, I think developing a policy around this is difficult. And it reminds me of the Supreme Court talks about, it's very kind of similar to, trying to define, obscene artwork or things. I think the quote is, you know it when you see it. And I suspect our teachers understand that, in any organization, you maybe have 1% of people that miss that and maybe get out on an extreme and do something stupid. And I would suspect if somebody did that they would be corrected. To create a policy and rules and everything to try to, prepare for that rarity, because it's been my impression that would be a rare event in Southern Lehigh during.
I agree with that.
And at the same time, look, nobody wants, everybody has to go to these schools. I mean, that's the difference about a school. You mentioned, and I know you didn't mean it this way, but the teacher said it's their walls. Well, it's not their walls, it's the community's walls. And so, but I think they're aware of that. I'm not saying that like I don't think they're aware of that. I think they're aware of that. And I think whether it's how they dress, there's any number of things that the teachers every day make decisions about, how they're going to go in, what they're going to discuss in their classrooms, what they're going to be wearing, what they're going to have on their walls. And I don't think I think they understand that. And so I'm kind of reticent. I feel like maybe we're trying to find a problem. And obviously, look, there may be some people in the community that feel that this is a problem. But frankly, actually, I thought Mary Joy had a point. I mean, if your child comes home and says, today, I saw this sign on a wall of my teacher's room, and there's a process to put that through. And I think it's rare enough in Southern Lehigh that frankly, that process may be adequate. And I don't know that we need to create a much larger process beyond that for the reasons you stated. It's fraught. I mean, I think you stated it very well, Dr. Mann. These issues are fraught, and all of us that work in a professional setting, I think appreciate the idea that we're trusted to make good decisions with good judgment. And to your point earlier in the meeting, when you talked about hiring good teachers to deliver good curriculum, that's what we do at Southern Lehigh. So that's why I'm on it. And so I think maybe we're kind of chasing after an issue that I, with rare occasion, have not seen as a major issue at Southern Lehigh.
Hold on. Wait. All right, I'm just gonna hold it. I would agree with you, Mr. Dimick. I mean, I think that, one, we have a lot of issues that we need to address and prioritize. We've already talked about that, in prior discussion items tonight. I think that, in general, I think our community has been through a lot recently. It's certainly been very adversarial. There's been a lot of conflict. I think that if we do have a defined mechanism by which, a family could complain regarding an issue, a sign or a book or what have you, then I think that as long as it's made clear to families that they can utilize that mechanism, then I think it's best to leave it there.
Anyone else with comments, questions?
Let me just maybe push back a bit against that and say, now this policy essentially does that, but it gives a small standard through which administration can make a decision. All right, it sets a very broad, but nevertheless, a standard. Absent this, and where it says, it's restricted to, so let me just read where it says, right? So the board recognizes the right of administrative, professional, and support employees to create their own classroom aesthetic. However, the employer retains the right to direct and manage items. This board adopts this policy to clarify situation in which an employee's classroom or decoration may vary from the district's specifically adopted curriculum. Right? And that's the issue. If you look down under guidelines, and those that are not curriculum related to the respect classrooms are subject to removal at the administration's discretion. And so those are standards. They may not be acceptable standards. And if we don't adopt those and we don't have other ones, then, administration would be making decisions without any direction, which,
Okay,
But we
guess-
don't have any room for, the thing is, my understanding of the mechanism that you described already would allow for, a family member to have, or a community member to voice those concerns directly to the board. My concern regarding having a policy like this is, one, we're going to start debating it and we're going to start adding things to it. And it won't be as vague anymore, which I think is a slippery slope. My other concern is that, even this baseline policy it says must comply with all board policies and procedures. Do we even have any board policy? I mean, the whole point is that we don't have any pertaining to this, right? And then, and that are not curriculum related, that's a lot of things that get put up probably that are not curriculum related. And one would argue that I would think more people would be upset about things that are curriculum related if they, oppose a family's ideals, right? So that's the only way, I understand where you're coming from to have some baseline, but I think even this baseline is, I think we're going to start that.
Well, I think we're going to end up wordsmithing it because clearly create their own is very, very broad language. Then it's compressed to curriculum-based and curriculum-related. So you have a juxtaposition of two ideas there that just don't make sense. Also, I'd be concerned with how does this work with the chain of command? If you have a policy regarding grievances or complaints that parents can use that goes through the chain of command to the board, then how does this policy interact with that when it says the superintendent's determination shall be final?
Right.
So we got a mess here of policy muck.
Yeah, and I would say that if the original policy says the board ultimately decides, but this policy comes in and says it stops at the superintendent, then that is the end of the thing. Because I would be worried, because if absent direction, right, I would be okay truly asking a partisan sign to come down, right? But, beyond that, the board will be the arbiter of signs, right? Because absent, a specific criteria, even not specific, but some judgeable criteria, administration is going to be very liberal in allowing signs on the wall. And then that will end up having the board as the arbiter of this, which I think itself is problematic and should be, I think, avoided.
But won't that happen anyway? That's going to happen whether we adopt this or we don't adopt that. Isn't that going to be the end result no matter what?
The board, you may get complaints from one side or the other. This sign was asked to come down, it shouldn't have, or this sign is up, it shouldn't be. But you will not be the decision maker. And you won't vote 5-4 on one way or the other. You'll say, this is what it is, and the superintendent said it, and we evaluate the superintendent. We may not even be in line with what he judged in this instance, but he did it, right? And that's his responsibility.
I appreciate that clarification. So then, in that case, I am in favor of moving forward with some type of baseline language so that it's not flippant and just dependent on, who's present at a board meeting. And rather than that, it should be consistent, I think, with the pathway that the district is following.
Yeah. And it's fraught, Dr. Street. I'm with you, right? I am totally with you all the way, and believe me, I'm not helping myself by suggesting that this is going to be with the superintendent.
I agree with Dr. Serene. I mean, I mean, you've persuaded me that probably.
And I'm not persuading. I am really not trying to persuade.
No, I know that. No, I'm just saying, I get that there probably needs to be something. And I do think it should rest in the administration with the superintendent. I just think less is more. And quite frankly, I would direct you towards the language at the Supreme Court. I mean, you could say something along the lines of, look, for the most part, we know it when we see it. I mean, a building principal, frankly, a senior teacher, a mentor. I think people can say amongst themselves, you know what, this particular thing you have here in your classroom is, it's not the best idea to have that up. And I think the average teacher will then look at that, reflect, and think, maybe that's not the most appropriate thing.
And could I add another layer of complexity, which I've been holding off on till now, right? Okay, but I'm going to, and that is, and this discussion is content neutral, all right? This is a content neutral discussion, this next part, right? And that is, we have a no place for hate school here, with great credit to the principal and all others, and a board-approved initiatives run by the Anti-Defamation League, and it talks about making sure that people are comfortable in the class that they're in and all that. And we would anticipate seeing signage for no place for hate because it's a board-approved district initiative here, okay? What concerns me, content neutral now, all right, is the idea that outside organizations, groups, individuals, right, would develop signage that then in mass or in large numbers would find its way onto our walls. Right? Imagine, for example, again, content neutral and without any comment on anyone's motivations, all right? All assuming they're good, all right? But we end up with 25 signs in a building, all right, that are all the same, all right? But it's not a district initiative. But a person walking the halls or a person visiting or even students going from class to class would look up and say, well, this is an organized circumstance where we have signs on the wall. And where does that come from, right? And I would say that such an event could be of great concern.
Who monitors the common areas for signage? Because I noticed going through the building, there's various signs plastered everywhere. There's so many signs you can't even read them.
Right.
And they're put up with all kinds of different materials, and it looks to me a little haphazard and unprofessional. And how far do you let that go?
Right.
And the content. So who is currently monitoring the common areas for signage?
Well, I think building principals will walk through. Different organizations will have billboard space.
So
It's Dr. Wayock. Dr. Wayock. Oh, you cut out? All right, I'll put you on the speaker here, and then you could hear us from the mobile phone. Okay.
Okay, so currently it's monitored the administrative guidelines are by default the principals.
Right, that is correct. That is correct. And so the question would be, all right, to what extent do signs from an organization, from the yards of our community, are allowed to end up in mass on our walls without it being a function of a district initiative? And that's, I think, an issue of concern, content neutral and motivation neutral. But I throw that out for your consideration.
So what is, I'm sorry, I hear what you're saying as the reason this is before us now is because there's a particular issue in the community that you are referencing.
Correct.
So what is the mechanism now by which if something appeared, like you said, if something blatantly inappropriate or partisan or something appeared, you would feel, and as has prior administrations for decades before, empowered to address that issue? Why is this instance different in so much that it requires us to talk about a policy tonight? That's where I don't
Sure.
understand.
Because in the past, we would, I just want to make sure Dr. Wayak is not, oh, he lost it, he lost this. Dr. Wayak, are you still with us? Okay, all right, good. Okay, good. And so first, we've not seen this before. Yes, there have been a single sign or two here, but at least I have not in my time. And maybe we have, all right? But I will tell you that we have no problem taking something that's obviously partisan, for example, and say, it'd be rare, right? But just we would guide somebody to say, that's just not a sign to espousing a political party, for example, or something that is obviously, but what we've not seen, and what we're seeing now, is yard signs that have a very innocuous phrase on them, all right, that's non-offensive, starting to appear in classrooms. And if that were to go unchecked, I could see, all right, the potential for there to be yard signs, and even, I think we all know, even the most politically charged partisan idea, all right, can be distilled to highly innocuous words, all right, on a sign. It can be, all right? And again, I'm not talking about this particular sign, but very, very charged ideas can be reduced to innocuous wording. And so I have a concern as a nation and as a community and as a state, we're moving toward, I think, more political than less political signs and more political discussion, that I think that we have to consider now the wisdom in having organized signage throughout our place that does not come from the Board of Education or from a school district initiative, because it communicates potentially a systems-wide endorsement of it when it's on our walls in numerous places, yet from the administrative point of view, we've not endorsed it.
So you're saying that, I hear what you're trying to say, but if this is an innocuous community phrase, why would we not want that in our classrooms? If it's something going on in our community and we're raising students who are a part of this community, and there's no boundary between the learning that goes on in our classrooms, in our homes, in our streets, in our parks, in our community, I guess I'm asking, if this is an innocuous phrase, then why are we looking at this now? I understand if it's something that is divisive or is causing a problem, but what I'm hearing you say is that has not yet been, that is not the case.
I was not speaking to the sign in question. I was speaking broadly to say
right,
that a sign that appears innocuous and uplifting can have underlying tones of partisan politics attached to them. And so as we move forward, right, while we have one sign in question now, I'm not sure how much support it'll have, but if that sign were to go up, then why not the next one, the next one, the next one? All right, and then we've kind of lost our ability, all right, to control our walls, right? And again, I'm not questioning the motivation of any individual teacher who would look at it on its face and say, what could possibly be wrong?
I mean, I think I understand your point. I think you're making a good point. I guess my question to you is, how is it that the current process of administrative review is not adequate for that anymore, I guess?
Right.
I mean,
well,
it's good music.
So sorry about that.
I mean, I guess I understand that there's been some changes recently,
right.
And so this is reflective of that, but how is it that your current process is inadequate to address it?
Well, and I'm just putting on Do Not Disturb. And so what I would say is that the only thing we have right now is a general complaint that is inclusive to signs and how well the chicken nuggets are cooked in the cafeteria, right? And I'm saying that the level of nuance in this
I guess my impression from before, I know what you're saying, that not the complaint mechanism, but rather, well, I guess in a way, but I mean, I guess what we were talking about a little bit before, peer review, internal administrators building principles,
right,
addressing it one-on-one. I mean, I guess that's really, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear, but is that not
Well,
no longer enough? Is that what you're,
it's, first of all, the issue is rare but emerging. And while we would sit down and say, what do you think about this sign? And then we'd say, what we'd always do is go to the policy and say, what are we or not allowed to do? What's the guideline here? And then we would try to interpret the guideline given the circumstances we face. But now, like, there really is no guideline for us where, yes, you can file a complaint, but how do we adjudicate the complaint?
Well, the guideline is common sense and good management and administration. And I think when you have a trend of incidents that are, challenging that and challenging you, it creates a level of discomfort.
Right.
And then one looks to write the policy, the rule, to make it a little bit easier. I don't have a problem with the guideline. I just have a problem with the language that's proposed here.
Sure.
I agree with what you're saying. I think what has happened in the past is when significant disruption has occurred, the administration has stepped in. And I think what you're describing now is not significant disruption. And if it were, we have faith in you to address that. And we have faith in our building administrators and our teachers even to not want to have something disrupting their ability to teach. But I think we have that in place, and really all I see this doing is opening up. If we write this policy in response to a sign that is innocuous now, what are we doing? There are bigger fish to fry. There are more important things for us to be focusing on. When it causes significant disruption, I have confidence in our teachers and our administrators for stepping in and taking action, and we can revisit this as a board. But I think to write a policy now just does not make sense to me for what we have before us.
Right.
Mike, I support the policy. I think it's a slippery slope if we don't have something in place with the politically charged environment that we're in now.
Right.
So I think this is a good start, and we can talk about it further with everybody and what kind of language we want in it. But I definitely think we need a policy. And, the board switches every 2 years, and the community votes on the board, and the community kind of says what kind of board they want. And so we need to make a policy that reflects what the parents and the community want in the school.
Okay. And I do want to address the significant disruption issue, standard, because that is the standard we use as far as imposing disciplinary action on a student who uses social media, right? It is a very high standard, and meaning that the school stops running in a very real and meaningful way. And certainly our solicitor can correct me on that, but it is a very high standard. And I would, in my view at least, right, that a significant disruption is too high of a standard, because a sign could fall well below causing a significant building disruption, but still have disruption to a particular student or class of students in a classroom with respect to the content. So I think that when we look at standards, I think it has to be higher standard, meaning more easily tripped than significant disruption.
And I apologize, that was my word choice. I did not mean to invoke a legal term when I said significant disruption. I meant significant in the life of a student or a teacher or a class. So I misspoke. I was not trying to invoke a legal term there.
Right.
We don't, if I might.
Yeah.
We actually have been recommending that you do develop a minimalist policy without trying to articulate what is offensive, what is even disruptive, because you want to avoid in the heat of the moment when there's something that's the hot topic of the day and there's a decision made, and then you get into legal areas of arbitrary and capricious, and were you picking on this, and then you get into personnel issues. What was the context of telling that person they had to take it down, but not that person? Having at least and I would prefer a very minimal baseline policy, gives you some legal basis for saying that comes down, the rest can stay up, without trying to define what that is.
And maybe we could, hearing that, perhaps maybe your office, Mrs. Montaigne, could develop some thoughtful approach that we could
Yes.
consider in our next discussion. All right?
And then I would just say quickly on top of that, Counselor, we could add that to our, our escalation process in section 900, where there's that matters regarding various employees. Also matters regarding program operation or instructional materials. You know, it may fit within there if this were to come to a point where it makes sense. But just a comment at this point from me.
And it being 9 o'clock, I think the book issue can wait for another night.
Well, and it just speaks to why we really do need to review policies and procedures and provide updates and become current with what's out there in the rest of the education world.
And I very much enjoyed tonight's meeting, so I hope that was the same for everybody. But I thank you for this different format, and that's all I have. I mean, I have more, but that's all I'm going for at 5 after 9.
Okay, do we have any other public comments? Okay. No comments? We do, okay. Okay, Douglas Durham.
Thank you, Dr. Mahan, for addressing this issue tonight and bringing it up. While staff members generally have the right to speak as private citizens on matters of public concern, statements made by staff members of schools pursuant to their official job duties are not protected by the First Amendment. Garcetti versus Cavalos. The First Amendment also does not entitle teachers to advocate for a particular viewpoint while teaching to a captive audience of students. Mayor versus Monroe County Community School Corporation. If a teacher wears a shirt or a face mask featuring statements or images related to Black Lives Matter, for instance, while teaching a classroom of students, the teacher is likely to be considered speaking as an employee of the district, with the nonverbal speech of the words and images expressed on his or her apparel or face mask. Therefore, a school district may prohibit the teacher from engaging in such expression during the workday when the teacher has a captive audience. A school district may establish policies prohibiting staff members from wearing clothing featuring political statements, and a district has the right to discipline staff members who fail to comply with such policy or directives. Likewise, signs posted by a teacher in a classroom constitute speech by the teacher in the course of the teacher's professional job duties, as those signs would be visible to a captive audience of students during instructional time. Thus, a school district may also regulate the teacher's speech within the physical classroom by mandating whether staff can display social and political messages in areas where those messages are visible to students. School districts should ensure that any policies regarding the ability of staff members to wear or display social and politically related signs are enforced equally among all staff with respect to all viewpoints. Neutrality, neutrality, neutrality. And avoid claims that such policies were ever enacted or enforced in a discriminatory manner. In addition, teacher-led discussion during class time regarding the state of politics in the U.S. are appropriate as long as the discussions are age appropriate and that such discussions do not advocate for a particular viewpoint. Teachers must be reminded that any curriculum-related political discussions should be presented to students in a strictly informational way, as a teacher may not advocate for his or her personal viewpoint before a captive audience. Dr. Mahan, you passionately stated to me in a meeting that you believe in protecting the civil rights of your students, and I believe you. I humbly ask you to consider the civil rights of those students who disagree with the ideological and political signs that they are forced to see as a captive audience. What about the civil rights of parents who alone, as custodians, have the authority to decide what is taught to their children on issues of morality and ethics?
Mr. Durham, your time's up.
Fairness requires immediate action. Thank you.
Amanda Seguin, can you correct your pronunciation of your name so I can?
Sure, no problem. It's Amanda Sejanel.
Okay, thank you.
So I am a parent in the district as well as a professor at a college of education and child development, as well as a doctoral student focusing on educational leadership, mental health, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just wanted to come and listen tonight because I'm aware of this topic that's going on in the community. I spoke a few months ago about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I just want to remind the board, if you're not already aware, that in 2020, the PA Department of Education released and approved the culturally relevant and sustaining education competencies. We're talking tonight about signage. I'm sure you all do know about education. The environment is part of the curriculum. So we keep talking about how this material isn't part of the curriculum, but if we are a no place for hate district and we're following PA education policy, which includes culturally relevant and sustaining education, these signs specifically that we're discussing today would support what we should be doing according to the state of Pennsylvania. One of the competencies, 5E, states educators help learners to value their own and others' culture. They help them develop a sense of responsibility, recognizing, responding to, addressing bias, discrimination, injustice, and bullying when they encounter it. And then competency 9, which I won't read verbatim because of time, talks about microaggressions. And I hear parents, and I agree that children are going to sit in classrooms and be uncomfortable with curriculum. Uncomfortable curriculum since this country was started. Okay, it's just we're offering a broader view of concepts now. I believe that, of course, there are certain political things that shouldn't be in the classrooms in the environment, but I want my children to learn to believe that differences are special and that they all belong here and that we should stand up for others when we see that they're not being accounted for equally as they are.
Tim Kearney.
Thank you. I said a lot before, so I'll make mine quick. I just want to do a quick shout out to the robotics team. My daughter's on the communications part of it, and they woke up, I think the buses left around 5:30 in the morning, Saturday and Sunday, went to New Jersey, both days in the snow, and they lost their first 2 matches, and then on Saturday and then Sunday just did really fantastic. They made it to the semifinals. I don't know what happens after that, but I just wanted to let you know about that. And my dad signed up as a science fair judge next year. I apologize. If it was me, Jeff, that you referred to as far as my walls, I don't know if it was. But oh, okay. Teachers use reason, and that's been pointed out. I think they use common sense and reasonable. If somebody said that they're walls, I don't think they're hanging up things that, in most cases, would offend people. They're trying to make it welcoming, as the last person said.
My 4th grade teacher, I still remember, his wife's had a Magnum PI. Tom Selleck. It was phenomenal.
Now, some people might say my Steelers poster was offensive and should be taken down, but that's not my opinion. I think part of the reason we have a tough time finding, Mr. Superintendent, I think the reason we have a tough time finding policy on this is because I don't think a lot of districts have policy. I think they just deal with things as they come up in a reasonable, making a judgment kind of way, like we did. So I don't, if it's minimalist to the point of it becoming, still being a judgment call, I guess I don't see the need for it besides what we already have. But I could live with a minimalist if that's the decision, but I don't think a lot of districts have it. Like Schuylkill is one that I found. I found it, but I didn't like it. I don't know where you found yours, but it's hard to find because districts don't have it. A lot of them. So it's just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Nicole Doolin.
Hello. If I understood correctly, when, just a minute ago, when it was being discussed, in front of the board, one concern was a lack of guidance, if I'm remembering what Dr. Mahan said. And, I think that means that the administration doesn't have guidance on how to make a determination when a complaint comes up. And so whatever you do decide about, either creating a sign-specific policy or leaving the sign complaint process be the same as any general complaint process, I think it would be worthwhile to say to yourselves that maybe a DEI training plan for both administration and teachers would be a good way to have that kind of guidance of making sure that ahead of time, before a complaint happens, that teachers have good guidance on what is considered inclusive to all students, every single student. I'm not talking about marginalized students only. I'm talking about all students. Making sure that a teacher has enough information to be able to check their bias, because we all have it, every single person. Have enough guidance so that you're making good decisions, that you're not accidentally being insensitive to somebody. And that same guidance could help the administration when deciding what to do with a complaint that gets put before them. I think that recommendation I'm making doesn't apply to which path you take in terms of policy that's specific to the sign or staying with the general complaint process. I think we can all benefit from learning continuously about aspects and groups that we don't necessarily know about, and not realizing that we've been doing something that might be insensitive or thoughtful. I think it's acceptable for teachers to respond to situations that are happening directly in this community and wanting to make sure that students who might not be feeling seen right now feel seen. I don't think that's politically charged. I think that's our teachers seeing our students and their human needs and responding to them. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Kristen Brooke.
So I made the signs that I'm talking about, so I thought I should help and clarify some things. Did not mean for this to happen, quite honestly. I talked to Dr. Mahan back in January, and he mentioned then that he wanted to make a policy about signs because parents had been complaining. And so my thought was, well, you can make a policy, and I don't know how extreme it will be. There's been extreme comments by parents in this community, but you can't take a sign out of my yard. And so I thought it would be a nice thing to do for the kids in this community, for the families in this community. I did not in any way advertise it towards teachers. They saw them, and teachers liked them, and they found my information and asked for them, and they bought them like everybody else. And I'm honestly kind of confused about the conversation because Dr. Mahan, you said that signs are innocuous and inoffensive. In fact, I wore this shirt to school today. I'm a teacher. I can't tell you how many kids came up to me to talk to me about this shirt because they felt seen. They felt like somebody cared about them. And that is what the signs say. They say, you matter, you belong, we are all Southern Lehigh. And I totally understand, where did these signs come from? What are they? There's nothing political about them. There's kids of color in this district, there's gay kids, there's trans kids. Taking the sign down is not going to remove those kids. It's going to tell those kids that they don't matter and they don't belong. So I certainly never intended for this to get to this level, but these signs were just a message of kindness. And so whatever policy you make, I think it's important to keep that in mind. And I'm sure you all read this open source article, but if you have any other questions about where it came from, since this is what you were referring to, I'd be happy to answer.
All right, thank you, everybody. With that, I guess we can adjourn.